Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome SaltStack CEO and co-founder, Marc Chenn.
Good morning. It is really wonderful to welcome you back to SaltConf. This is SaltConf16. This is our third annual user conference, and it's so wonderful to have a full house here today. I think that if you're having to sit on your neighbor's lap or get a little too close to the person next to you, it's because we have a full house today, and we're very grateful for that. I wanted to just start off by saying, expressing to you how grateful we are as a company for your attendance. We're immensely grateful for the support that you've shown us over the years. This is our third event. SaltStack has been around for 4 years now, and we've come a long ways from those days where Tom and I were working in his basement, building this thing out and really trying to build the vision of what this was to become. And so to have you here today is a tremendously encouraging event and show of support to us, and so we thank you for that. We're extremely grateful for, sorry, I don't have my clicker. There we go. Thanks, Andrew. So over the course of 3 days, we have 17 sponsors that have come and that have participated. We want to thank our sponsors, many of whom you'll hear from today. We have 575 attendees. We're pushing that 600 number level, which is great for us, which is almost double what we were at last year. And we'll have over 80 speakers that you'll hear from over the course of the next couple of days. So I think altogether, we've got quite a lineup for you to hear from. In many respects, SaltConf really is our baby, not just because it really literally does take 9 months for us to put together, but it is one of those things where we feel like it truly is representative of who we are as a business and what we've built as a company. So last year, when I was on stage here, I spent a lot of time talking about and really reinforcing this notion of SaltStack as a revolution. We believe internally that great technology, great ideas, great people, dynamic individuals are the basis for tremendous movements, strong movements that really drive thought, drive change, and drive innovation. And we certainly believe that SaltStack has become a movement, as evidenced by all of you and all of your participation in the community. So we talked a lot about revolution last year and how building upon this revolution of SaltStack, this movement, is really a force for change within this whole IT operations management and systems management landscape. So building on that theme this year, I wanted to talk not just about SaltStack as a revolution, but build on that and talk about the ongoing evolution of our company as well then. Now, as I mentioned before, this has been an amazing journey. 4 years ago, actually a little over 4 years ago, back in February of 2011, Tom had this notion that he wanted to build a better systems management platform. And you'll hear from Tom tomorrow, and he'll talk about some of the great innovations that we've come up with over the last 12 months. But together, when we came together in early 2012, we had this vision of building the next great systems management company in the world. And that's really the mission that we've been on. And we've done it in modern ways because we've done it with the help of a community, and then we've done it commercially as well. And so we'll talk about that today. But it's really amazing for us to see and to look back over these last 4 years and to think the perspective that we've gained in what we've built. So we talked about revolution last year. We're talking about evolution this year. We took our own challenge last year in terms of trying to disrupt ourselves as a business and really move forward in evolving SaltStack into what it is and what it will become for the future here. This is a pivotal year for us in our business. This is an inflection year in many respects, and so we're excited about talking to you and sharing with you a few of the evolutionary things that are happening within SaltStack and that are making it what it will be for the future. So I think that without saying, the community has been just phenomenal in SaltStack. This is a different business than I've ever built, incorporating the best of open and commercial software into one great whole. That's what SaltStack is, and that's what SaltStack is becoming. We've seen a tremendous evolution. We can talk a lot about the growth of our community. We started off with just a few contributors and users. I think that we have LinkedIn here in the audience today. LinkedIn was one of our very first contributing companies. And they've built a tremendous infrastructure on the backs of SaltStack. We can talk about the growth of our downloads, right? We can talk about, last year we had about 1.8 million downloads. This year we're on pace to break 4 million downloads. So you can see the tremendous growth and that inflection that's happening there in terms of the sheer number of usership. When we think a lot about the contributor counts, right? When Tom and I got together, we were just in the tens and the low hundreds. And now, SaltStack has a contributor community that is active and that continues to repeat at a clip of 85% repeat contributions. That number of contributors is nearing 1,900 today. Let's get a show of hands, those that have contributed to SaltStack from the audience here. All right. Thank you. What's been really amazing for us as a business is to see how open source downloads translate to corporate usership. It's often those of you who have downloaded Salt in the open and began using it that you've become our best evangelists within your corporations, within the companies that you work within. You're the tip of the spear. You're the ones that are leading innovation with your own organizations, driving these DevOps movements here, driving change, pushing for agility and speed to take place within your environments. And so we thank you for that. And so there's a tremendous landing experience that happens when you download and you start to use it and evangelize SaltStack within your own companies. And what we've seen is that there are tremendous companies that are starting to use SaltStack and really expanding on the commercial opportunity that exists out there for us. And it all really works into one virtuous cycle, doesn't it? SaltStack, downloaded in the open by a member of the community or someone that's curious to utilize these innovative new technologies and tools into more of a corporate IT environment. We're really trying to make sure that SaltStack accommodates both ends of that spectrum there. We take a bimodal approach to the way that we approach systems management and IT in general. So we go land and expand, and then as that migrates north, we've tended to see other organizations like TD Bank, like Adobe, like Clemson University, that have continued to use SaltStack and to expand the footprint and the usership of SaltStack within their own companies. So we thank you for that, because your download, your use of these innovative tools, and the way that you continue to evangelize that just perpetuates that virtuous cycle. We've seen SaltStack utilized in many innovative ways, right? We think of SaltStack as an orchestration platform that's event-driven in nature, that provides predictive capabilities for the future. Really a modern approach to systems management for both infrastructure and the application layer. But we've seen some really interesting use cases take hold as well. You'll see on stage today and tomorrow, you'll hear about some of the IoT use cases. You'll see a demonstration about how SaltStack is being utilized to manage Hue light bulbs. We know that SaltStack is being used on the casino show floor for those intelligent slot machines. They're using Salt to manage those devices. We know that there are weather sensor companies that are using SaltStack to both manage the Arduino machines that are being shot into the air to gather weather patterns, as well as the core infrastructure that backs those devices. So Salt is being utilized in a variety of ways around the world today. And we thank you for that, because it's your innovation, it's your idea, it's your willingness to disrupt and challenge the status quo and the norms of how you would typically perceive a systems management tool to be used that's allowing those innovations to happen. So keep that up. As a company, we certainly have evolved. And for me, I think that you've heard me say in the past that we've got a very distinct flavor within SaltStack. We're not satisfied with just being the next company out there, the next technology company that emerges. We have a very distinct culture within SaltStack. You've heard of our no jerks policy, right? And thank you for continuing to spread that out within the community. We've got a no jerks policy. Also, we talk about hiring smart, hardworking, and humble people within our organization. And so we view our culture as being one of our competitive advantages within the industry. And I think that when I look out across this audience here, and when I've interacted with the members of our community, I really feel like you're a reflection of who we hire within our business. And so I thank you for that, because you help to reflect the values and the distinction that we have as a business. Now, we've come an enormous distance over the last 4 years, from 2 people in a basement to a company that's growing at a pretty rapid pace. By way of company update here, we've grown at over 150% since inception in terms of our growth. Our employee bases has grown a tremendous amount as well, and that doesn't happen without a great host of individuals that are all working in a concerted fashion to make that happen. We've learned a lot of really valuable lessons about the value that we bring to organizations. Fundamentally, I think that we know that Salt is a great technology, and that our community is active and vibrant. There's a fanatical usership that's out there, and that's really driving a lot of the innovation and the movement within the community. We've learned a lot over the last couple of years about our value to the market and our value to our customers, and it really is a value play. It's about driving efficiency, saving time, saving money for those that are actually going to use SaltStack. And so when we think about that value proposition, whenever we go in and we're providing value to an organization, those are the things that we really hone in on, in addition to the extremely innovative and forward-thinking technology that we do provide. And so we'll talk about that today, and we're excited that we'll announce a few things here in a moment about that technology. When we think about partnerships, I'm very pleased to announce that on an ongoing basis here, that there are companies that want to continue to collaborate and innovate and partner with SaltStack. And today I'm pleased to announce new integrations and partnerships with companies like IBM within their cloud division, with Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, with VMware, and with SUSE. We will be announcing other integrations and other partnerships over the coming months, but we're very excited about what that means for the growth of SaltStack, the ongoing proliferation of our tool set, and the way that it becomes more valuable to you and your company as well. So the last point of evolution that you'll continue to see is the ongoing evolution of this fantastic technology within SaltStack. We know that we've got, very humbly I say, we feel that we have very innovative and cool technology, right? And I think that having you here, I think, is just sort of helping to back that up. But when we think about the traditional user, the tip of the spear where these technical developer users have been taking SaltStack and using that to do interesting things, that provides one use case, right? That provides a very early, very technical use case. But we're also finding that these technologies and the way that we're tailoring our technology is going to allow us to scale into a very traditional use case wherein the IT operations user is also going to drive great value. So again, that bimodal approach is going to allow SaltStack to satisfy both the most technical user in your organization as well as the most operationally focused user with their specific, interface. So you're going to hear a lot about the new features, the new capabilities, the technology innovation that's happening within SaltStack today through your user sessions, and you're also going to hear about it tomorrow as you listen to Tom speak here on this very stage. I'm very excited for that. It's always a real treat for us. But today, I'm pleased, for those of you that were in classes, you might have gotten a little sliver of what's to come here. But today, I'm very pleased to announce the ongoing evolution of SaltStack's commercial products in announcing SaltStack Enterprise 5.0 for our users. This will allow us to penetrate into both sort of the dev and now the operations environments of corporations. And so I'm very excited to announce that. In a moment here, I'll welcome Matt Meservey, our head of product, to the stage to talk about that. But before I have Matt jump on stage here, I wanted to just conclude by saying a few things here in thanks and also just in conclusion. As I mentioned before, SaltStack really is a movement. It's become a tremendous movement where, when we look across the globe, 40% of all activity, all downloads and usership is happening outside of North America and 60% within. It's become a global phenomenon and a global movement, and you are a part of it. I want to thank you for that. I want to thank you for your participation. I want you to know that wherever you sit within your organization, whether you're on the most technical side of the spear, or whether you're on the operational side of the organization, or whether you sit somewhere in the middle there and you're a force for change and you're trying to drive innovation and unification within your company, that SaltStack has a solution for you, and that those solutions will enable you, fundamentally, to drive great value for your organizations. I believe that we can have a lot of fun doing this. We're just at the very beginning of this journey here together, and we're excited about this ongoing evolution. The fact that you're here is evidence that you want to be a part of that journey, and so we're very excited about using today as a great launching pad for us into the future. And so we'll look forward to having you here again in future years. We'll look forward to your participation in the community. We'll look forward to our partnership on a commercial basis. We're very excited about that. And I want to just extend a final thank you to all of you for coming today to SaltConf16 and wish you well over the next coming days here. So with that said, I'll introduce Matt Meservey from the head of product.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Director of Product Management, Matt Meservey.
It's great to see you guys in Salt Lake. Who's excited to be here at SaltConf this year? Give it a round. Awesome. I worked hard to get them to do it in March like last year so we could all cut a day and go snowboarding, but unfortunately it's April. We'll have to leave and go look at the flowers. It's super nice out there. We're super glad to have you guys here. We're super excited about the things we have to share with you, and we're really excited about the next step in the evolution of SaltStack. So who here today, give me a show of hands here, who here today got a whole bunch of new budget this year to manage infrastructure? Right? Crickets? Okay. Who got a bunch of new infrastructure to manage despite not getting new budget? Right? Yeah, pretty common. Who here is excited to do a lot more work with a lot less effort? Look like rock stars, yeah? Okay, who here is already a Salt user? Okay, and who here is excited to expand the use of Salt in their infrastructure and their company to other people or other infrastructure, right? That's what we're here to do today. So 5 years ago, Marc and Tom had a dream. They had a dream to have an exceptional remote execution and systems management tool. They built the SaltStack open infrastructure. They built this tool set. Our wonderful community threw their shoulder to the wheel and really drove the project forward and added a lot of functionality. And then 2 years ago, they brought me in, and I had a dream too. I wasn't a Python developer. I wasn't a coder. I was a systems administrator. And I said, this tool set that we have is such a tremendously capable thing, but it can be expanded. We can take this to the masses. And so we really started to push the SaltStack Enterprise forward, and we're just about to release, we'll be in beta within a few weeks, the next evolution in SaltStack Enterprise, SaltStack Enterprise 5. Now, we were going to do a demo, and they asked me for a whole long list of slides and a deck of slides, and I hate slides as bad as anybody. I'm as ADD as anybody in the room. If anybody, I don't remember what we were talking about. Anyway, we threw that out. I said, I'm not doing slides. They said, well, you got to have some slides. So I said, well, let's just look at what it looks like. So you guys can kind of take a look at it. But what I want you to know, I want you to have 4 key takeaways about the next version of SaltStack Enterprise. Who cares about security in their infrastructure? If you have employees here and they didn't stick their hands up, you should probably start finding replacements. Security matters. The Chinese, the Romanians, that weird kid down the street, everybody's trying to get into your infrastructure. Security is a big one. SaltStack Enterprise brings security into the Salt Enterprise, into the Salt platform through a role-based access control model, so you can easily control who has access to what. This is huge for our customer base, and it's probably my most common request. We have what I used to call, until yesterday, in every team we have what I used to call the IT ninjas, and then yesterday somebody, I don't know who's here, if you want to stick your hand up, gave me a new term, the alpha geek. And SaltStack is very heavy in the alpha geek community, but we'd like to take SaltStack to the masses. But that means you can't give the non-alpha geek control over your whole infrastructure without risk of usually terrible damage, because not everybody knows what they're doing all the time. So role and scope-based security or role-based access control is a huge thing. One of the biggest new things is the addition of what we call the Enterprise API. You guys may have heard of it referred to last year. Who was here last year, by the way? A few of you. Okay, you may have heard it referred to as RAS, the Returner as a Service. It is now grown. It is now evolved into the Enterprise API. The Enterprise API is a tremendously powerful piece of, it's more than just an API set. It's a piece of business logic. It's really the engine that runs the Enterprise 5 product. It includes logic for data routing and filtering. It includes logic for storing of events. It includes logic to roll up history from jobs so that you can track job history. Another thing that does that makes life a lot easier on you guys, it talks to all the masters in your environment. So you no longer have to go to each master to run jobs. You can create a job, you can create a target. Those targets are persistent, and then you run a job against a target, and it doesn't matter where that minion is attached. It doesn't matter which master it's attached to, it's going to get the job. So the Enterprise API handles that multi-master management. It also handles all the data. It also handles all the data roll-up and all the data reporting. So the Enterprise API, along with an intuitive and easy-to-use front end, and the ability to see auditing on anything that happens in the system. Every target, you can audit anything that happens on that target. Any job that runs, you can track anything that happens on that job. Anything that happens at the command line, we capture that too. So the alpha geeks who want to stay down at the command line can go in and continue to manage the things you do at the command line. We'll capture that history too, so you know everything that's happening in the infrastructure that's so critical to your businesses. And then last, we have this tremendous reporting tool, so you can go and get easy visibility into what's happening. You can tell at a glance what's connected, what's not connected. And maybe one of the most exciting things, we have reports which will actually tell you how compliant you are with your high state or other states. So you can actually run a report and say, is my infrastructure in compliance with my high state? And if not, you can remediate that automatically. So 4 or 5 years down the road, 2 years into my tenure, I'm excited to announce this Enterprise 5.0. I would ask you to come. We have a session right after this where we're going to go over it a little more in depth. We have demo stations out in the vendor area. I would urge you to go talk to our SEs, put hands on it, and then go ahead and apply for the beta. We're going to take applications for the beta. We're going to open the beta up here in 2 or 3 weeks, and let's get going. Let's take Enterprise and let's take the power of SaltStack to the rest of the IT world. Sound good? Thanks for coming, you guys. I appreciate your time, and have a good show.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome CTO Hybrid Cloud IBM Distinguished Engineer Simon Kofkin-Hansen and Chief Developer Urban Code Distinguished Engineer Michael Elder.
So, hi there, I'm Simon.
And I'm Michael, and we're here to talk about how to break out of your data center with some open source technology with Salt and Heat. But first, I want to thank the entire SaltStack team, including Marc and Matt and Rhett, for having us out here. We're very excited to be here. And with that, let's go ahead and jump in. So what we were going to talk about really is focused around this key idea that with some open source technology, leveraging Salt for the automation layer, and some open source technology leveraging OpenStack Heat for orchestrating infrastructure, we can put together an approach for open patterns across different hybrid cloud environments. So the rest of the talk, we're going to kind of set up that concept, and right after the keynote, we're actually going to have a breakout session and do a demo of what we mean by that. So we'll drill into that with more detail there, but we want to kind of make sure you get the high points.
So what we found over the last couple of years that the analysis has taught us, we actually haven't done a private cloud deployment in IBM for about 3.5 years. Every single cloud deployment we're doing is hybrid. And when we talk hybrid in IBM, we're not just talking x86 on-premise to x86 out in the public cloud. We're also talking hybrid platforms, bringing in our Z systems, P systems, yeah, making the mainframe relevant again in the cloud computing sense of the world. And many of the things we've actually seen, when we all bought into cloud computing many years ago, one of the very first things we were promised was cost reduction. Cost reduction. Cloud computing was actually going to decrease our costs. At the beginning, this wasn't actually the case. With how high-priced cloud engineers, cloud architects, vendors charging a premium, cloud computing was actually more expensive than traditional IT. Until about 3.5 years ago. And what changed at that moment in time was the advent of automation. Well, not so much the advent of automation, but the maturity of automation tasks. The only way we found to drive down cost in cloud computing is through automation, through getting repeatable tasks, and to a certain degree, raising the value of the cloud engineers, the cloud operators, and the cloud architects up the value chain and leaving the mundane tasks down to automate automation and the repetitive task it brings. We also found realizing hybrid cloud comes with its own challenges. You have inelastic consumption, no common authentication. Actually, we all talk about hybrid cloud and the interconnectivity of these different platforms, but it's actually quite difficult to implement. So achieving repeatability, achieving consistency, that actually can only be done through leveraging automation and automation frameworks such as SaltStack. So one thing I also wanted to touch on was this IBM and VMware announcement that was made a couple of months ago. So the whole premise of this announcement was to provide existing VMware client sets, existing on-premise VMware clients, a cloud consumption model for their software in the IBM Cloud. So getting people who know and understand the VMware technology, but giving them an option to actually leverage their technology, leverage the different technological choices, but in a public cloud consumption model. So with no modification of security, allowing their standard VMs portability between the IBM Cloud and on-premise, and more importantly, no new skill sets. This is all to do with providing consistent, seamless, and simple, more flexible consumption and a global reach with the IBM Cloud. So being able to move your particular workloads between the different data centers. Underpinning all of this are orchestration frameworks and config management languages. So we can't actually achieve all this portability of the different workloads. We can't spin up and move the different workloads without leveraging SaltStack and the Salt formula that we've created. I've talked about no change to workloads. I've also talked about bare metal deployment. So when we talked about hybrid, we talked about hybrid platforms, leveraging the SaltStack formula to actually do deployment of workloads, whether it be on bare metal, whether it be on virtualized infrastructure, and making that portable, and making those deployments portable across many different cloud types and many different cloud platforms, whether it be VMware, whether it be OpenStack, whether it be bare metal. Some of the other things that the merging of these three technologies has brought about is we've got certain differentiators in moving the different workloads between different geographic regions. So the speed and the portability of what we create with the automation and actually deploying that on-premise or into any data center around the world and portably moving that is the combination which is that we've gone for, with combination of the VMware, the Salt technology, and the IBM Cloud. This is just to give you a map of the reach. Some of the demonstrations that we can show you and we'll talk about, we can actually deploy and move workloads and the particular Salt formula associated in under 2 minutes between the different geographic data centers. And that's achieved through the dark fiber, the network, the combination of network, IBM infrastructure, the VMware software, and all the Salt formula that actually do all the real grunt work.
So when we talk about breaking out of the data center, we talk about these technologies to help expand your existing footprint, leveraging technologies that most of our clients are using around VMware, and the importance and the critical nature of automation to help drive scale and cost. What we're really seeing then, when we look at the application tier, is this sort of perceived notion of hybrid cloud architecture being something that's new. But reality, whereas we think that apps will become hybrid, the reality is that they've been hybrid for a really long time, right? All the way back to the 90s, it was distributed, coming in and changing the cost and the economy of creating new applications. But you still branched out to what you had deployed on the mainframe, right? Every credit card transaction, every travel reservation, every banking something at some point hits a mainframe in some large client. And so we saw then the introduction of virtualization, right? Virtualization offered lots of benefits, but you still had this bridge between the architecture of how application components deployed on distributed virtualized environments linked back into your existing backend systems. And what we're seeing now is just, while it's a sort of more mosaic context with different levels of cloud, some public, completely shared, some more dedicated instances tied to a particular enterprise, some local, it's still sort of just a variation of this problem that we've had for the last 2 decades, but we're beginning to see it drive a certain level of scale that we may not have really seen before. So I don't really have to tell this room, because of your background here, that building out these types of actions can be hard if you're trying to do it all by hand, right? You guys are here because you recognize the value of Salt as a way to automate this. And so we're trying to leverage the same kind of technology with automation to make this easier, but do it in a way that helps us sort of standardize across different cloud platforms as well. So what we're going to talk about in the breakout session in more detail is really how we can drive this full stack automation with Salt and with Heat across different cloud environments, how we can make sure that the patterns and the content we're producing are following high availability and disaster recovery patterns that are following best practices for that particular kind of middleware, whether it's IBM, whether it's a third party, whether it's open source. From our perception, all of our clients use a blend in every case. And then every time that we deal with this kind of deployment, there's always this question of how do I automate the deployment of all of these new systems in a cloud environment that's much more vast and broad than I've ever had to manage before, right? And how do I do that in such a way that I can then tie that all back into my existing operational lifecycle? Integrate monitoring aspects, integrate log collection aspects, deal with license tracking, things like that. And the way that we want to do that is with open formats that help drive more innovation in the community and with curated content developed by experts in the space. And so when we talk about this notion of a pattern, there's really sort of 2 key components here. One is Salt, leveraging Salt for all of the automation that runs in the operating system, the configuration of middleware, the management of the OS, et cetera. And then we've also, with IBM, we have investments in many open source projects, including OpenStack. OpenStack Heat has been the format that we've chosen to drive forward on how do we orchestrate provisioning virtual machines, provisioning networks, provisioning storage, bundling it all together into a complete topology, and then layering the Salt automation on top of it to construct my entire system. And then again, tie all that back into my operational lifecycle as I stand it up. And so patterns, as we talk about them, are made up of these various things: base images for the operating system, binary files for the application, the automation scripts written in Salt, and orchestration templates written in Heat. When we look at the value of these patterns, it's really about driving standardization across different cloud environments. With cloud, we obviously have a much more powerful API layer that maybe wasn't there with the virtualization revolution, or really wasn't exploited as much as it is in cloud. Obviously, faster deployment and delivery, driving down cost. You know, Simon called out that while cloud promised lower cost throughout this sort of value proposition, you don't really achieve that until you start taking advantage of this software-defined nature of the environment, the API-driven deployment through the cloud layer, the Salt-driven automation for the operating systems. And then because you're doing this over and over and over again, you're driving down the overall risk factor, right? You're deploying these in dev environments to provide production-like systems and QA environments with guarantees that they match logically what's in production, although maybe not at the same scale. And then using it to deploy all the way into production so you've got consistency. And the key here, right, the whole point of the title is to break out of your existing shell and not limit the locality of where you can deploy. The automation and the technology can work across your local environments, across dedicated clouds, across shared clouds, and allow you to scale up and down as needed based on costs or new demand. So really this concept of the open patterns automation runtime, providing portability across each of these different cloud platforms that are listed, and driving it through a Salt and Heat-based automation process with some technology that we've added to Heat to actually allow it to talk to native cloud APIs other than OpenStack, enabling it to deploy to Amazon, deploy to Azure, deploy directly to the VMware vCenter. That's what we're going to show in the talk after the session. And then ultimately, probably going through VRA to deploy into that layer to provision environments as well.
So one of the things we just want to really stress here is the portability The portability of the automation, the portability of the workloads is only achieved through leveraging this common format, leveraging SaltStack, leveraging heat, and leveraging these as a mechanism to move these workloads and reuse. I mean, we've been leveraging automation, particularly in this sense, and particularly in the patterns realm, for about a decade. And automation only becomes cost-effective and only becomes valuable if it's reused. If you have to keep, every time you want to make a change, you have to keep rewriting the automation, or you don't look at creating the automation in reusable modules, which is something we're going to cover in your session, automation actually is more expensive than cheap human-based labor. So this is one of the things. These are some of the things we're actually going to cover. These are some of the things we actually want to show, is how we've actually leveraged the standardized approach for Salt Formula, how we've shown and breaking down the reuse, not just at a formula level, but even further, down at a component level, to make the use of automation simpler, easier, and quicker. So composition of the automation becomes faster, the reuse becomes faster, and everything becomes standardized. So it allows new people to actually pick up the skills a lot quicker, but also if something happens to your engineer, they move off to another higher-priced job, or they get run over by a bus, your whole automation framework doesn't actually disappear with the knowledge of the engineer. So these are some of the things that we couldn't actually do without the collaboration we have with the SaltStack team and with some of the standards that we've introduced.
Absolutely. So with that, come join us right after the keynote. We'll go through, talk more about the standard that Simon's called out, talk about how we're trying to drive this to a much broader application across many different pieces of middleware, different cloud environments, and show a demo of how this all fits together as well. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome VMware Director of Product Management, Vipul Shah.
On the day I was born.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Hope you guys are doing great. So I just wanted to start with a little bit of a story. Just a few months ago, what we started to notice was that a lot of our customers were actually coming back to us and saying, we use Salt as well, and we would really like to combine both your solutions. You got VMware Stack, and if you ask these customers, these guys are in a journey. A lot of them started with compute virtualization. I think everyone out there uses it now. But then they have these advanced use cases they're trying to really kind of put into production, which is security virtualization, advanced network virtualization, advanced storage virtualization, right? So automation is key for all of these guys, right? I mean, you got thousands of VMs that you're trying to deploy. You're trying to create things like microsegmentation, and really you want to utilize policy-based management to really accomplish all of this. And then VMware has tools like vRealize automation that kind of enables you to do that, right? But that's, it's still something where our customers, the journey that they're taking is where they also want to, go into application modeling, application automation, right? DevOps. So they're getting ready for DevOps. So some of them are in sort of early to middle stages of DevOps implementation. So they really like SaltStack as well. So basically they came back to us, and then as Marc, Chenn was talking about, culture is a very important part of Salt. They're very, very good people to work with. And so VMware and Salt put their minds together, the best minds together. And I think what we have today that we would like to show is really very cool. So before I get there, I want to talk about a use case example. So I asked these customers, what kind of use cases are you talking about here, right? Let's just be very clear about that so that we can deliver to you what is very usable for you. So here is an example, one of many examples of the use case, which is microsegmentation. So in our customer, if you look at their scenario today, they've got, security is very important, obviously. They've got very strong security around the perimeter of the organization. But if there is any vulnerability that goes into or crosses the perimeter, then essentially in the middle, it's all, the vulnerability can travel anywhere it wants to. It can go and infect the workloads, right? And not only that, as the workloads are increasing, we are talking about DevOps. What that essentially means is very, very fast turnaround for the workloads, the fast development. Basically, you're talking about a lot of VMs, right? And so for that level of fast churn, the kind of rigidity that you have with your existing security systems, it's just going to be an administrative nightmare, right? So what you really need is a topology where you got a security perimeter around every VM. Every single virtual machine has to have a security perimeter around it. If you are scaling your applications, then you need a security perimeter around those scaling groups, right? That's exactly what I've shown. Your web group has a scaling, it's a scaling group. It has a security perimeter around it. Essentially, when you're done with a topology like that, it really resembles that of a honeycomb. Essentially, you got those individual cells, and there is a hardening around each cell, right? So that's exactly what people are looking for. And that's what VMware vRealize automation also provides. But then, in addition to that, of course, you want to deploy your middleware, your Postgres database, your JBoss app server, right, or your Apache web server. All of those things are very important. They really want this, the end state to be controlled, to be known, right? And that's where Salt's excellent config automation comes into play. So the end state is something that they're looking for, which is exactly shown right there. And so what we decided to do is, this is just one of the use cases. We have many other use cases that our customers are really trying to deploy, and they're really looking for an enterprise-grade solution from both the vendors. So we put our heads together, and we've been working with Salt for a few months now. And what we have today is really, we're announcing a vRealize Orchestrator plugin. It's a plugin that really makes the job of integrating both these technologies very, very seamless. We actually have a demo right after this particular keynote where you can actually go and see how that actually works, how exactly you can deploy that. But the previous use case that I showed, basically with this plugin, you can deploy that with great amount of ease, right? So I talked about two things. I talked about orchestration, the automation. Then there's also the DevOps, which is continuous integration, continuous delivery. So basically with this plugin, you are able to achieve both. We've got two products, automation as well as code stream that would integrate with SaltStack, and will give you the full lifecycle provisioning, right? So that exactly is the goal that we have. Now, how did we go about achieving this, right? When you see the plugin, you'll not notice a lot of the back-end things that we've kind of taken into account. I mean, Salt is very good with event-driven orchestration, and then vRealize automation is also an event-driven orchestration platform, and then that's what we've done. We've actually used the event-based system to connect both of these technologies together, right? So that's kind of behind the scenes. The way we do things is we take care of the whole life cycle, starting from bootstrapping the minion, right? So when vRealize Orchestrator or automation, when it deploys your blueprints, your virtual machines, we basically deploy minion there. Basically, we bootstrap that, we authorize it, and then we basically tell the master, Salt master, that, hey, here is the role designated for that minion, and then basically we cede control to Salt at that point. And then basically the whole life cycle is taken care of. At the very end, when somebody wants to tear down, because the workloads move, you may want to tear it down. It's a DevOps world. Things happen very quickly. Basically, we make sure that everything is left in a clean state, right? So that's exactly what the Orchestrator plugin achieves. And what you get at the very end, and kind of this is the vision that we have. Let me just build this through. So the overall vision that we have is Salt community really produces a lot of good work, right? It's one of the important aspects of Salt is the contributions from community. So we want to make sure that we are able to our customers are able to leverage all the good work that comes from community and all of those contributions. So you can actually import a lot of your salt formula, your states into the automation tool that we have with vRealize automation, build it into the blueprints. So blueprints are the things that kind of hold all of these things together. They're policy driven. So when you have security policies, you actually expose them in the blueprints, right? That's how you get that microsegmentation, that honeycomb kind of a topology that I'm talking about. And then you define that in the blueprints, you control through the policies, and then you publish to the catalog. A catalog is something where anybody can, if you have permissions, you can go and consume from the catalog, right? It's a self-service world, so that's your means of consumption. So that's it. So basically, with the plugin, this whole thing is very much available. And then in addition to that, we have code stream that gives you continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline. What I want to do next is, there's nothing better than talking to someone who's actually been practicing a lot of these kind of use cases. So I want to introduce and bring to stage Nitin Madhok from Clemson University. Hey.
Thanks, Vipul, for the amazing introduction. Hey, everyone. I'm Nitin from Clemson University, and I work as a systems developer and programmer.
Great, awesome, Nitin. Thanks for coming on stage. So tell us a little bit about your role at Clemson and your kind of your group at Clemson. What do you guys do?
So I basically work for Clemson Computing and Information Technology, which is the primary provider for computing and information technology resources for Clemson University and its affiliates. We also maintain a lot of enterprise applications and servers and databases for the state of South Carolina. Just to give you an idea, we have an annual budget of about $80 million, okay, out of which $63 million is from state contracts, grants, and self-generated income.
Okay.
We process about $6 billion of insurance claims, health insurance claims per year.
Okay. So you guys are a lot into, looks like a lot of infrastructure automation is needed there, along with some application automation, the whole DevOps stuff. So is that accurate?
Yes, definitely. We use a lot of automation to pretty much do everything from orchestration to remote execution, config management, deploying VMs, maintaining our VMware infrastructure.
Okay, give me some estimate about how big is your VMware infrastructure?
We have about 268 ESXi hosts, which are managed by 5 vCenters, and they're distributed across different pods in our data centers.
Okay.
About 2,500 virtual machines, and the new pods basically use software-defined networking.
Okay. Cool. So looks like folks here know you pretty well. I mean, tell me a bit about your involvement with Salt community and what are some of your recent achievements.
So I've been involved with the project for about 3 years now, from the early stages. I made some significant contributions to the project. Some of them including making it compatible with Python 3. I also created the VMware Salt Cloud driver to deploy and manage virtual machines, ESXi hosts, manage your data center in your VMware environment. Some of the other contributions include ZFS, zpool modules, ASAM runners, DNS runners, the list goes on.
Yeah, that's a lot. So looks like I think that deserves that, yes. Yeah, I was about to say that, so if I were to go to GitHub and look for peaks, that probably would be your contributions there, right?
Yeah, actually, if you go to the contributions, there's a very high peak. You can tell probably that's me. So.
Awesome. Very cool. So tell me a little bit about, so I shared this microsegmentation use case. Is this something that you think would be relevant for Clemson?
Yeah, definitely. Like I mentioned earlier, we do deal with a lot of healthcare data. So we have to be compliant, and security is a very big concern. So in our environment, we've got the Clemson network, and then we've got internally the healthcare environment is separated from the campus environment. And then within the healthcare environment, it's a silo, but we've got different applications and different VLANs, and each VLAN has its own network segmentation policies. So what the use case you explained for the policies would be definitely something that'll make things easier to manage on the VMs. Right, absolutely. Okay. So, any kind of parting thoughts around, the solution that we built together with SaltStack and VMware, essentially the plugin that would make, this kind of a use case simpler? Yeah, definitely. So what I built is basically going from Salt to VMware, and it's not, so the application VMware built is definitely enterprise level, and it would support more customers, and the support around it would be better. From a developer point of view, the cloud driver would initially be easier to use, but eventually in an enterprise, you obviously need enterprise-grade application and support around it. Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it great to give that choice to our customers, and basically, they can use whichever thing works for them, right? In development environment, they can start with the tool that you built. As they go into production, they can start with the orchestrator plugin and basically keep that all intact. Yeah, definitely. If it's an organization that uses both VMware and SaltStack, it's like icing on the cake for them. You pretty much have the flexibility. Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much, Nitin. That was really very good. Yeah, thank you again. Thank you. So this is my last slide. Essentially, what I want to do is there is a session that's going to have or start right after this particular keynote. I encourage you all to actually go there and check it out. Again, it's co-developed with SaltStack as well as VMware. So we'd be happy to answer your questions and show you a demo. Thanks a lot.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Virtustream's Manager of Platform Engineering, Steven Gonzales.
What's up? Cool, so my name is Steven Gonzales. I work in platform engineering at Virtustream. Our platform engineering team is responsible right now for our Apache Mesos container-based infrastructure and our OpenStack infrastructure that we run in production in support of our object storage platform. So thank you guys for having me and letting me talk today. I'm going to share a little bit, more of a narrative of our use of SaltStack internally. So we're going to talk about how SaltStack was a little bit of an experiment 2 years ago, and all the kind of bumps and bruises and lessons learned along the way to where we have it in our production infrastructure now, and then our continued kind of pain points and areas that we want to grow in. So Virtustream is the newest member of the EMC Federation. So last year I gave a talk kind of harping on formulas and continuous delivery of formulas, and I did that under the banner of EMC Cloud Services. So since EMC acquired Virtustream, they kind of took a lot of the cloud service business units and rolled us up into one under one umbrella, right? So I'm coming with a different logo this year, but with the same team and kind of a similar story expanding on our growth. So Virtustream in general provides infrastructure as a service, object storage, and managed services on top of that cloud infrastructure. Their main goal is running mission-critical enterprise workloads in the cloud. So they have a lot of guys that specialize in running, big, hairy enterprise applications like SAP, and taking those out of customer data centers and then running them in a cloud infrastructure, right? So they develop a lot of deep trust with the companies that we do business with in order to get that kind of, level of trust to run those kind of sensitive workloads. So just to give you a glance at where we're at with SaltStack right now to kind of lay the groundwork for the story we're going to tell. We're currently using SaltStack to manage about 15,000 nodes in production across about 25 data centers. I have a plus in there because those numbers grow all the time. We use it to manage all the storage nodes that make up our 2 exabyte object storage platform. And we also use it to manage our compute-based platforms consisting of VMware, OpenStack, and Apache Mesos. And you're going to hear from a couple of our guys later who are going to tell some narratives about how we specifically use SaltStack in our Apache Mesos deployments. So before Salt, right? So we've been kind of like an ambitious group, right? And they often drop on us some really just audacious goals that at times, when you're presented with these challenges, it's just like, are they crazy? This is ridiculous. And so we've been kind of developed a reputation for being able to deliver on that stuff. And we initially used to do that by just delivering the environment itself. So we had a whole bunch of custom homegrown tooling for provisioning and deploying environments, right? Provisioning storage, provisioning VMs, standing up, some REST services. But we really didn't have any story for how we were going to manage the environments after we stood them up. In fact, going back and thinking about like what DevOps is supposed to be at the time, we didn't really think about it, but we used to even have a separate build and run team, right? So we had all this automation to deploy it, and get the thing stood up, and they were like, all right, here you go, now the run guys can have it, right? And then there was no story and no work put up into that when we would deploy those sites. So we decided that we needed to figure something out, right? We needed to get an answer to this problem. So we decided that we were going to do a POC and choose a configuration management tool that we were going to try out in one of the sites. So as we commonly do in our fashion, we did that in a single environment, our single largest environment of the time that was about 5,000 nodes. So it was a great tiny little place to do a little POC of some mission critical type software that you're going to use to manage your infrastructure. We originally started with Salt 0.17. So a lot of us had come into the group with a lot of deep backgrounds in some other configuration management tools, and we kind of did a reevaluation of all those tools based on who had experience with them and what the current feature sets were and what the directions we thought they were moving. And the number one reason we chose Salt was mainly for the speed of execution, right? We didn't have a huge backlog of code already to apply to the infrastructure, so we wanted to get some immediate value about being able to run commands quickly across these thousands of nodes. So we started off really just utilizing command execution and getting some immediate benefit and getting some of our operational pains under control. Looking back at that now, I think if I had a bunch of cowboys executing command.run all over the sites, I would probably have a heart attack. But at the time, that was like a great idea. So every now and then that caused a couple of problems, but we got through it, right? Then we started to really dig into, what does stateful management mean? What is pillar? What are states? How are we going to apply these to the environment? How are we going to start getting control of this infrastructure? And we started out following a pattern that I'm guessing a lot of you probably started out with, and that probably a lot of people still use and is perfectly okay for some environments, and that was using the monolithic Salt repo, right? So we had a huge Git repository. It contained all of our pillar tree, all of our state tree, and everyone just contributed to that one repository, and then we used that to manage our environment. So we thought, this is awesome, right? This is what automation must look like. Look how much we've improved, right? And we're like, you know what we need to do? We need to mass produce this as quickly as possible and scale this out, because we have more of these, it's going to be amazing, right? So we started to try to do that, right? We started to try to scale out this model and start to apply it to new environments and different services and kind of spread the love of Salt to other teams just outside of our group and try to get this thing to catch on. And what we found is that maybe our initial approach wasn't the best way to scale, right? And we'd end up kind of creating a little bit of a mess in some cases. So what were the major problems that we had taking that monolithic Salt repo and then trying to scale that out to a bunch of different environments? One of those is that we had a lot of environment-specific code buried in the logic of all of our states. Why? Because there was one Salt repo and it was applied to that environment. So why not stick all the logic for the environment in your states, right? And so what that led to was really, really, really poor code reuse, right? So we'd end up having another Salt repo for another project. People would, oh, I need this SSH thing from here. So they'd copy and paste the states over to the other project, and then they'd change that and put in their environment-specific code in there. And we really started getting this copy and paste mess of divergent states, right, with no longer any kind of correlation between each other. That also made it, we also had a lot of problem deploying our pillar in states. At the time, this is kind of before GitFS was really in its prime. We had a lot of trouble getting the code out there, and that really caused people to check out the code and then having engineers SCP the newest changes up to the salt masters, right? So that led to a lot of inconsistency in our environment. Had they checked in the code before they pushed it out? Had it been merged? Did they just overwrite someone else's changes that just checked out code, made a change, and pushed it out, right? Happened all the time. And our salt masters grew to be wildly inconsistent. We'd use this configuration management to solve a lot of our automation, operational problems and get things into a consistent state. And then now all the problems we had solved with it were now being seen on the salt masters themselves, right? So we said, okay, there must be a way to solve this, right? Another kind of downside to the massive pillar repo or monolithic repo is it's really hard to test changes. When you have all your states bundled in there and somebody makes a change to one of them, how do you know which ones to test, right? It becomes really difficult to separate out the concerns. So we really had to kind of take a step back from what we were doing and say, there's got to be a different approach to this problem, right? We've got to stop treating this like a collection of operation scripts that we're going to go run on these nodes. And we're going to have to start thinking about this with a software engineering perspective. And so let's take a look at the common best practices in software engineering and kind of try to figure out how those might fit into this environment, right? If your infrastructure is code, then you should probably software engineer the heck out of it, right? So making sure everything's in version control before deployed, setting up a pretty solid code review system for people to review changes, right? Which means having some consistent style and patterns that the reviewer's looking for. Using design patterns, right? If you see the same problem over and over and over, create a pattern that you use to solve it every time, right? Modularize, right? Just like we were copy and pasting all these salt states everywhere, you wouldn't do that in a good application development, right? You would say, okay, I wrote this code, same code in 2 different places. What would you do with it? You'd probably make a shared library or a module, right? Tests. I don't think anyone in our group right now that's writing application software would dream of contributing their code without having tests that accompany it to assert that that code does what it's supposed to. And then you get into automated testing and deployment, right? Continuous integration. And continuous delivery. So think about that from the application perspective when people are deploying microservices. Why do they do continuous delivery, right? Because you push out a bunch of itty-bitty tiny changes every time, which reduces the amount of risk and havoc you're going to wreak on the environment. We've all been in there where we've gone into our Salt and made some huge refactor and reorganized all the code, and now we're terrified to run it on the system, right? So we decided to tackle this problem by using formulas. So I gave a talk last year that's kind of more of a deep dive of how we exactly went about doing that. But we decided to kind of standardize on a couple of patterns and a little bit of a style guide that we used with formulas. So if you're not familiar with formulas, formulas are a collection of tightly coupled states, usually related to a single application or service, that's stored in a single standalone Git repository. Right? And that allows us to isolate the code that we're trying to use and treat that as a shared library. So some of the patterns that we introduced for managing formulas were, 1, every formula contains a vagrant file, right? And I'll warn you, none of these are like revolutionary or groundbreaking. Most of them are pretty simple. Every formula contains a vagrant file with a salt provisioner so that all local developers can vagrant up and have the salt states provision that VM, right? Every formula contains a test directory where we use Python and Fabric to then run on top of that VM and assert that things were in the state that they expected them to be in, right? So is this process running? Is this port listening? Is this file where I expect it to be? And some other application-specific behavior that you might want to add in there and test. Then we started thinking about, well, we have to manage state and execution modules that we write, right? And so we kind of got the idea that we were going to bundle our state and execution modules with the formula that they were closely related to, right? So say we have a Cassandra formula and we were going to have some custom execution modules for managing Cassandra, we would bundle those in the formula. So then that led us to the idea that we need to be able to distribute this together and make sure that those states and modules travel everywhere that formula needs to go. So we decided to add code to our repos for packaging our formulas. I think Salt's now since released kind of an internal packaging mechanism. This predated that a little bit. We rolled Debian packages to do that. But they would bundle and install on our Salt masters in the right directories all the formulas, the execution modules, state modules, and then later we'll even get into like how we decided to do that with orchestration. So once we kind of had this system rolling, it gave us a good foundation from which to build from. So last time when I came out here, we had just done a Salt formula and maybe like 12 other formulas that we were using in this manner and started to have deploying. So what this really let us do is make an automated build pipeline. Once we had all the hooks in there, we used Python Cookie Cutter, which is an open source project that lets you define a project template using Jinja. So everybody that would go to build a new formula would render the cookie cutter with the specific name of their formula and a little bit of information it would ask you for, and you would get the same setup that we use for every other formula. So in there, we had hooks that we could make to easily hook into our build system. So we developed a workflow that had developers make a pull request, right? A code review process of someone else on the team giving that a +1 or a +2 before merging that. And then that would kick off an automated process that would do the vagrant up, right? Provision the VM, execute the tests, right? And get a pass or fail output from those tests, and then destroy the environment after the fact to clean up after the build, right? If all that was successful, then a build artifact would be created, right? A package would be rolled. We'd get notifications in Slack, right? So that we could see all the changes that were coming through the environment. And then we would deploy that artifact into a repository. What this also let us do is create a really cool dashboard that shows all the status of our Salt formulas. So we now had a place to go in and look at what's out there already. Let me browse through them. What's the health of them, right? You don't have to go to a public repo and say, this looks okay. I wonder if this formula works, right? So we know if it works, and if they're lit up red on there, we know that they're not working right now and somebody broke it, right? And we know that those might need a little TLC before we want to work on them. So kind of the next phase that we implemented on top of that was we still hadn't solved the problem. We'd figured out how to modularize, right? We figured out how to add some design patterns in. We figured out how to package the code, but we hadn't really yet figured out how to distribute it. So what we decided to try to do was write a Salt formula, right? So it seems to make sense and force state on your Salt masters using Salt. So we have Salt masters that auto high state themselves. What's probably a little bit unique about our approach is on those masters, they have pillar data that allows them to be configured. And so we have it where you can specify the formula packages that are needed in that environment. So in the SaltMaster high states itself, it'll pull down those packages from our repository and install them in the environment. We also have it set so that if new formulas pass build and testing and get released, the SaltMaster can go and install updates on itself. We also distribute our pillar data in the same way. So while we have all the formulas modularized out and individually packaged, we still have a pillar repository that's specific to the environment. And we package that, and the SaltMaster installs updates to that on its own as well. So our SaltStack today, we made quite a big journey from where we were last year. Like I mentioned, we had our Salt formula, we had some auto high stating masters, and we only had about 10 or 12 formulas, and we were really hoping that this would continue to grow within our org, and that we would, hopefully presenting some of that at SaltConf would help it pick up some steam. Well, it turns out it worked really well. It became the de facto way to use Salt in our environment. Right now, I checked our GitHub repo that we store all our Salt formulas in before I came out here, and we have about 140 plus Salt formulas that we have on stock. So you go to deploy a new environment, we've got your NTP, we've got your syslog, we've got your SSH, we have your database, we have your RabbitMQ, whatever you might need to add into that environment, we have a lot of stock there ready to roll and plug into that. Like I said earlier, we use that to manage about 15,000 nodes. All of those 140 formulas go through that continuous integration and deployment process, and all of our Salt masters in all of our environments auto-high-state themselves. So now that we had kind of got our stock of formulas, got our Salt masters, self-salting, we started to move into the space of orchestration and how do you deploy services. So this brought us up kind of to a different level of problems, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We'd solved, some of our base needs, and now we were able to move up to some higher order problems, right? For a while, the team that I was on was pretty devoted to just cranking out Salt formulas and managing automation in the environment. But we had now kind of grown that stock up to where we were now ready to start actually delivering different services and platforms to the rest of our group. So we started coming into some new problems now, which were how do you test and deploy clustered applications, right? So think about that single Vagrant setup, right? I have a Vagrant VM, it tests the local salts. Think about, go back to this because it's a great example, something like Cassandra, right? You can't really test your Cassandra formula by deploying a single Cassandra VM, right? Because that's not how you're gonna run it in production, right? You might have 20 of them, or 8, or maybe just 3 or 4, right? And so the only way to be able to test that is to be able to actually deploy a cluster, right? How do you test things like, RabbitMQ clusters with federation, right? Where you might actually have to have commands run on different nodes at different points in time before that clustered relationship can actually be formed, right? And these were starting to get to be trickier problems that we didn't quite have the answer, for our automated test environment, right? Those are things people had to test manually to make sure that worked. How do you deploy collections of dependent services, right? Which gets into some of your basic orchestration. But then to even complicate that, how do you deploy similar bundles of services in different environments? So we still have our formulas separated out, but think of something like Apache Mesos, where we have Zookeeper, we have Console for service discovery, we have Mesos itself, we have Docker, we have Marathon, right? And all those services, we may use Zookeeper in some other context, like with Kafka, right, outside of Mesos. But we also use Zookeeper in that Mesos deployment. So how do you let that Zookeeper formula live separately on its own, but still be a part of this bundle of services that travels together? And that was another kind of challenge that we were figuring out that we were going to have to tackle if we didn't want to create another mess of code. So we're going to have a couple of breakout sessions where our guys are going to actually dig into how we have approached solving some of these problems. So we have Chad Hoyshober, who's a principal engineer on the platform engineering team, and he's going to talk about how the challenge of deploying Mesos revolutionized the way we use SaltStack. So I have to say, our Mesos environment for us was a really great achievement. And we put in months and months of R&D work and testing in order to get that thing off the ground. And we decided that we were going to launch that 100% completely automated by Salt. And they presented us with a lot of challenges of how you bundle the orchestration, how you test something as complex as that. What are the design patterns you use to be able to easily orchestrate that? And these guys, they pushed it to the bitter end. So even when we got down to being able to deploy Mesos with like 4 or 5 orchestration commands, that wasn't good enough. And they continued to drive and drive and drive the pattern until we got that thing down to a single command deployment. And then ended up using that to run it in 8 different data centers, right? So it was definitely worth the wait. And I'm really proud of those guys for the work they did. And Chad's going to take you through all the devil in the details of how that came to be and all the things we struggled with and the things we still struggle with in that regard. And then we're going to have a talk from Charles Rodetsky. He's also a principal engineer on our platform engineering team. And he's talking about put your formulas in a formula so you can orchestrate your orchestration. And that's going to get into some of the stuff I talked about earlier, right? I have a Zookeeper cluster. I want to be able to orchestrate that, right? And so I want that orchestration is pretty similar all the time. I don't necessarily want that orchestration to live in the environment repo. I'd like to find out how to bundle it into the formula and drive that orchestration through our pillar data, right? And then now that I have that collection of services, which might have a bunch of different services that require orchestration, how can I then import that orchestration out of those formulas and layer them together which take you to that end goal of having a single orchestration command to deploy your application, right? And so Chuck's going to take a deep dive into those. So what are our keys to success with SaltStack that brought us on this journey? In my mind, all of this is really about the guys that I work with, right? I have a super awesome team. We work 100% remote. It's kind of like the guy standing next to you, right? Everybody's in it to the end. Everybody has each other's back, and there is a constant drive for improvement with these guys. Number two, everybody codes, right? So everyone that comes onto the team, all new members transferring from other teams, go through a code screen process because we want to know that they're going to be able to apply those software engineering patterns to our infrastructure code. Automate first attitude, right? Our first environment was really rough because we built it first, had it in operations, and then we're trying to go back and apply states to it, right? And that's, if you've ever done that before, which I'm sure plenty of you have, that's a scary, scary, scary time, right? You never know when you're gonna break something that's working, and you know that you've never quite covered all the different pieces that are required. And the only real way to get around that is to be committed to tuning and honing your automation first before you go live, right? No matter how much of a gargantuan effort that is. And the last is never stop improving, right? Internally, we're constantly complaining about our design patterns, our use of Salt, how we go about doing things, right? You'd probably think it was a horrible setup. It's one I'm really proud of, but that kind of criticism of what we do is what drives us to continuously improve that. So I'm happy to say that they still let me wake up and come to work every day. I get to work with a great group of people, solving amazing challenges, and having really the time of my life. And I'm ever in a situation where I'm not doing that, then I'm going to reevaluate what I'm doing with myself. So just to kind of leave it off, what's next, right? So what are some of the major problems that we feel we still need to solve and still struggle with? Some of the stuff that Chuck's going to talk about makes Pillar a little bit easier to test. But as far as the Pillar for our environments, changes to that are still really, really, really hard to test, especially when someone goes in and starts to try to refactor and better organize things. That can still be a scary time and is a pretty involved process. And we have some automated testing around Pillar, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be to ensure that changes to Pillar are going to be safe. Another point, which I'll make for one of my dear friends on the team, is that we're having to accept that Jinja is not a programming language, so stop it. Right? We've seen, even in our own formulas, some big, hairy, tangled globs of Jinja filled with logic. And it is so terrifying. It's hard to test. It's hard to read. It's hard to understand. So we're making kind of an effort going forth to, A, figure out what of that logic could be extracted to an execution or a state module where we can use a real programming like Python to express that. And there's a little bit of R&D going on that we've barely lightly touched, which is trying out some different renders and saying, hey, maybe this use case is complicated enough that we use something like PyObjects and just express all this in Python, right? So that's another big one for us. And the last big challenge that we kind of have is being able to orchestrate the entire data center. So we've got some different applications and different services down to single command orchestrated deployments, but our dream would be able to say, we want to deploy this entire stack of 4 big platforms in a new data center, push the button and go. And that's all right. Thank you guys very much for your time. Don't forget to check us out in the breakout sessions.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage, Marc Chenn.
So this was a great morning, and to wrap it up before we head off to the sessions, I wanted to say thanks to everybody that's been here this morning. There's just a couple of things that I wanted to take care of from a housekeeping perspective. One, thanks everybody for coming this morning. We've got another session tomorrow morning that's got both sponsors and keynotes alike. You'll hear from Tom Hatch, CTO, and the technical founder of the SALT project speaking tomorrow, so I know that all of you will look forward to that. So come back to that, but we've got a full day of courses, classes, and breakout sessions that you'll be able to participate in today. Second, wanted to make sure that you all knew that the program guide, have you guys downloaded the program guide? The agenda is completely electronic and digitized this year. So please download the program guide. You can access it online, but if you go to the Apple Store or Google Play, then you'll be able to get it from there. So that's point 2. And then point 3, how many of you guys came to the party last night? Who's got a hat, huh? We've got another one tonight. So not a hat, but we've got other things tonight, right? Those were pretty cool. So stickers, shirts, lots of fun things tonight to expect at the party. It's going to be another great event. That starts at 6:30. It'll be over in the other ballroom. So that's taking place tonight. All right. So we've got a full day ahead of us. Let's kind of gear up for some great learning. And we'll see you tonight at the party, and then we'll meet back again here tomorrow morning. So thank you very much. Have a great day.